In the last 3 years, we have spent a lot of time talking about Peter walking on the water toward Jesus. We've imagined ourselves taking risks and moving closer to Jesus. We reflected on the meaning of this story from Matthew's gospel in our own lives, both individually and as a diocesan household. Today, I want to imagine with you about how we might see the life of our diocese through the lens of Peter's ministry and the time after he steps out of the boat. You know from our Holy Week readings that Peter stepping out of the boat in faith isn't his final act. He travels with Jesus to the very end and is one of the most colorful figures in the story of the Last Supper and Jesus's arrest. He argues with Jesus over foot washing. He cuts off the ear of a servant, and he denies Jesus 3 times in the Garden of Gethsemane. Despite his demonstration of faith on that boat in the Sea of Galilee, Peter is often, he's kind of a hot mess. But Jesus sticks with him. And in the last chapter of John's Gospel, which tells the story of the resurrected Christ appearing to the disciples, he singles out Peter for leadership. Feed my lambs, Jesus says. Tend my sheep. And finally, Peter gets the message. He goes on to become one of the leaders of the early church, preaching and teaching across the biblical world before, as tradition tells us, being martyred in Rome by the Emperor Nero. We observe his feast in the Episcopal Church on January 18, when we remember him as the first person to confess Jesus as Messiah and Son of the living God. But long before Nero, the book of Acts tells us about how Peter and the other apostles built the early church, figuring out how to live and proclaim the good news in a world where everything had changed and where everything was uncertain. Acts 2 tells us how Peter preached to the first converts on the day of Pentecost, and how this small movement patterned its daily life. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of the bread and the prayers. I believe this story and these words can guide us here in the Diocese of Vermont. We too live in a time where everything has changed and where much is uncertain. In the last 10 years, our diocese has become nearly a third smaller, and much of our work together in the last several years has been about finding ways to contend with that reality. In the last year, thanks to the work of Thrive and our interim CFO, Mike, we've made major strides in putting our financial house in order. As you heard at the pre-convention hearing, and will hear again in the Treasurer's report this evening, we now understand better the resources that are available to us as a diocesan household. And we have developed a budget for 2024 that includes meaningful resources for formation for both clergy and lay leaders. We have also made significant progress in making Rock Point Commons more financially sustainable. I'm pleased to say that under the leadership of Executive Director Kelly Kimball, and in close consultation with the Rock Point Commons Board, CJ Spirito, head of the Rock Point School, and with the diocesan trustees, we are strengthening our partnership with the Burlington School District. The district is planning to consolidate its 2 alternative high school programs, On Top and Horizons, at Rock Point, to create a single campus based on student-directed learning, voice, and agency. Our partners at the school district have found that the young people enrolled in programming at Rock Point have benefited from this sense of sanctuary in this beautiful natural environment. This partnership is a continuation of Rock Point's long-standing tradition as a place for young people to find space and solace. This new agreement is envisioned as a deepening of our partnership with the Burlington School District that began in 2020. This partnership has already and will continue to support the financial stability of Rock Point Commons and make possible much needed resources to update and repair our aging conference center facilities. Despite the financial progress we are making, both at the diocesan level and at Rock Point, not all of our financial concerns are over. And in order to devote ourselves more fully to formation and mission, we have had to tighten our belt in other ways, bidding farewell to the Reverend Canon Walter Brownridge as a member of my staff after nearly 3 years of faithful service. My prayer is that this sacrifice will be worth it, that these hard-won investments in formation and mission will help us be more intentional in our work together, more able to devote our whole minds and hearts to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of the bread, and to the prayers. This formation and mission budget, detailed in the pre-convention journal, will make it possible for us to support clergy in both constellations and standalone parishes, continue training lay preachers through the Backstory Preaching Program, provide consulting for parishes through Tri-Tank, which you heard about last Saturday, launch the Anti-Racism Action Team's racial healing sessions, and offer adaptive leadership coaching and training. It is crucial for all our congregations to engage in discipleship formation. That being said, our new formation and mission budget also continues support for the Green Mountain Online Abbey as a diocesan resource for supporting adult discipleship information, spirituality, and prayer. Through the Abbey, there will be several offerings throughout the year to support the discipleship of all the members of our diocesan household, and will especially be a resource for parishes that don't have ongoing adult formation programs. The next formation offering for our diocesan household will be an Advent and Christmas study of the Psalms. I want to highlight one other new initiative that will be made possible by the formation budget. In January, Constellation leaders and committee and commission leaders will begin Fierce Conversations training. This program has long been used in the Diocese of Chicago and other places in the Church to help leaders communicate clearly and have the kind of hard conversations that are required to lead change. I am grateful to everyone who will participate in this effort to enrich our relationships and have the conversations we most need to be having as we continue navigating an uncertain future. In 2021, as we wrestled with where God was calling us in the midst of the pandemic, the Diocesan Council adopted new mission, vision, and value statements, as well as a description of the way we intend to be God's people in this place. In the next year, as we, like Peter, devote ourselves to living and proclaiming the good news in a world where everything has changed, I believe our statement of the way will be even more central to our ministry. And here it is. Realizing our mission will depend on communication, collaboration, and participation from all congregations, institutions, and individual Episcopalians as we pray, worship, give, learn, discern, and serve. Each of our communities is unique with its own interests, challenges, and gifts. We honor our individuality and shared identity as Episcopalians in Vermont and commit our congregations to working together to strengthen our collective witness. It's no surprise that honoring both individuality and shared identity requires balance and flexibility. And it's no secret that living in community is sometimes challenging can even involve conflict. Just read Paul's letters to the early church to learn about that. In the last several months, we have been very fortunate to work with the Reverend Gay Clark Jennings, a seasoned church leader and consultant who has conducted a mission leadership review assessing the strengths and weaknesses of our ministry together and the opportunities and threats we face. 48 people in leadership around the diocese participated in in-depth interviews with Gay, and the report that she has provided to me and to the expanded standing committee will be invaluable in helping us embody our vision of speaking hard truths and taking bold action as we follow the example of Jesus' love. Later in this meeting, Gay will present the results of the mission leadership review and be available to answer questions about how we can use it to strengthen our ministry and witness to the world. All of this work in financial management, information and mission, and leadership and relationship building is in the service of strengthening our parishes and missions. In the last year, we have made meaningful progress in initiating and strengthening constellations, which is what we call parishes or missions that share clergy and collaborate in mission. Right now, we have 12 congregations involved in constellations and 10 more that are in various stages of discerning a new partnership. Constellations are not mergers, and they aren't like yoked parishes that we used to hear about decades ago. Constellation congregations don't necessarily share vestries or governance, but they do work together to focus on opportunities to follow Jesus in new and renewing ways. Sharing clergy means that we have more opportunities to attract and retain clergy in Vermont, which is important in the midst of a church-wide priest shortage. And since we have a cohort of congregations participating in constellations, the training, coaching, and support we provide for constellation lay leaders and clergy is richer and more fruitful for everyone. At their best, constellations will become more efficient in managing administrative tasks and expand their ability to engage in ministry with the communities around and between them. But perhaps most of all, constellation ministry can help us free up the capacity and creativity to realize our mission statement. The Episcopal Diocese of Vermont, we place our trust in God, finding new ways to serve, worship, care for creation, and foster conciliation and reconciliation across our state. In our constellations, as well as in many of our standalone parishes and our diocesan missions, our goal is always to trust God as we are called ever more deeply into relationship with one another, with creation, and with the communities we serve. I am eager for the coming year of our ministry together and excited to see where our faithfulness will lead us next. Like Peter, we will not always get it right. Sometimes we will lose our nerve. Sometimes we will fail ourselves or one another, just as Peter sometimes failed Jesus. Sometimes, like Peter, we will just kind of be a hot mess. That's okay. Like the faithful Christians of the early church, if we devote ourselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers, we will find ourselves drawing closer to Jesus and to all of God's people in our brave little state. This is my prayer for all of us this year and always.